Hello and welcome to TechDredge. Widescreen monitors have been the standard for years now, and while they're great for gaming and watching TV shows, the standard 16:9 monitor has never been the greatest for productivity. 16:10 monitors are a little better, but you still lack vertical space, so you need to be rotating monitors from landscape to portrait depending on your task, and this can get a bit annoying, even if you have display fusion software like I showed off last week. Luckily, the good folks over at EIZO have come up with a solution and have made the perfect productivity monitor that uses a 1:1 aspect ratio. Yup, it's a perfect square, and it's exactly as awesome as it looks. The official name for this monitor is the EIZO FlexScan EV2730Q, and it is the only 1:1 monitor that is available to purchase to anyone who has the money. It might be the only 1:1 computer monitor in existence for all I know. I did a fair bit of research and couldn't find any others, but it's a possibility that they exist in specialized fields such as medical or scientific research. The monitor is 26.5 inches across diagonally and about 50 centimeters tall and 50 centimeters across. It's a square, get used to it. This translates to a resolution of 1920 pixels by 1920 pixels, 1920p if you will. EIZO calls this square full HD. You can push it up to 2048 by 2048 pixels, and it's still very usable, though the refresh rate drops a couple of hertz. At 1920 by 1920, this has the same amount of pixels as a 2560 by 1440 widescreen monitor, but the 1:1 aspect ratio makes those pixels a lot more usable, since you don't have to deal with scaling issues, and you of course get much more vertical resolution while maintaining the full horizontal resolution of a high definition widescreen monitor. Pixel density is pretty much perfect on this monitor. Physical overview time. The front is a square panel with surprisingly thin bezels. There is an EIZO label on the bottom left corner, and in the center of the monitor is a speaker, which is just awful. I would much rather they have ditched the speaker and lowered the price to $2 it cost. It sounds really bad, even by monitor speaker standards. Next to the speaker is a motion sensor, more on that later, and all of the menu control buttons as well as a power LED. Actually, let's do the motion sensor now, before we get into the really good stuff. The monitor has an EcoSense function built in, which means you can configure it to turn itself off when you get up and leave the room, and to turn itself back on when you're sitting in front of it. It actually works really well, and you can configure up to 5 levels of sensitivity depending on how much you move around when you're at your desk. You can toggle color profiles between either 2 custom user profiles, a movie mode, a more color accurate sRGB mode, and paper mode. Paper mode reduces the amount of blue light in the monitor. It's all flicker free, and it's to reduce eye strain when committing to long periods of reading or writing. It works very well. It's not the first monitor I've used with this feature, and since I program a lot, it probably won't be the last. On the back is a very robust stand with height adjust and tilt. The stand clips onto the rounded base effortlessly. You have DVI and DisplayPort video inputs, as well as a 2-port USB hub and audio pass-through. So what is the 1:1 aspect ratio actually like to use? The answer to that is awesome. When I first got this monitor, I plugged it in, turned it on, and before I even sat down, I was sold on it. I'm not sure I've ever had any product in any category revolutionize the way I work in such a short amount of time. It's really that good. Essentially every single task that's even mildly productive is enhanced by this resolution. We shall start with the basics and work our way up. Web browsing is a faster, more enjoyable experience. Modern web pages are already well designed for the 1920 horizontal resolution, and the added vertical simply minimizes or eliminates scrolling. The Windows Start screen, and yes, I still use this on Windows 10, fits more icons on the monitor without scrolling, which makes it a really great application launcher. Spreadsheets and databases are again great, because they rely upon a lot of vertical space, and depending on exactly what you're doing, you can even fit a couple side by side. Though with really complex databases with lots of columns, you can still make the most of that horizontal space. This is again really useful in word processing of all things. You can fit a 2-page spread side by side in Word with 0 horizontal or vertical scrolling. Heck, you can do it with room to spare to throw a music playlist or an email client or something else above it as well. Continuing in this vein, layout design and things such as Publisher or InDesign is again enhanced so much because you can just see everything, even in a 2-page spread, which actually helps you visualize what the layout's going to look like once it's printed. That said, this monitor is not aimed at truly professional color work. The monitor is color accurate to a degree. The panel is a 10-bit IPS affair, so it can show a lot more colors than essentially any consumer grade monitor, though you will need a workstation graphics card to actually be able to show it. So you can do color work on it, but if you're being paid by Hollywood to prepare marketing material for printing or to color grade a whole movie, maybe another monitor is the way to go, and EIZO makes monitors that are built specifically for that, and they cost a lot more than this one. And it's a bit of a pity really, because Adobe SpeedGrade color grading interface on the 2730Q looks really nice. Just the sheer amount of space that is actually usable by applications makes this so much better than a wide or ultra wide monitor. All of the tasks I just mentioned are just a fraction of the jobs that this monitor can drastically improve. I could go on for ages, so I'm going to. Programming is of course the main reason I was interested in this. There's enough vertical space to be able to reference your own code, with the horizontal space useful for longer line length, with enough left over for IDE controls, a file tree, and library references, or to stack two files side by side. In specific programming cases such as web development, you have room for a code window and a full-size preview above it. Photo editing and viewing is also a great experience. You get the most out of your photos whether you took them in landscape or portrait. The real surprise for me though was how great video editing was. This is a typical Premiere Pro timeline setup on a 1920 by 1080 display. It is a very usable setup, but the live preview is so small you have to have a secondary display for full screen preview. And Premiere doesn't handle that very well. It renders the second screen completely unusable for anything else since you can't minimize the preview. On a 16 by 10 display, you can make the preview a little bit bigger, but the extra vertical space really isn't enough to do anything substantial with, so you will still need that secondary display. Since a video timeline needs a good amount of horizontal space, I always thought 21 by 9 ultra-wide displays would be the ultimate video editing experience. But even the highest resolution ultra-wides can't comfortably fit a full resolution preview. And enter the square monitor. Not only is there enough room for a full-sized live preview, you also get enough room for a timeline, effect controls, and color correction tools. You can configure the workspace exactly how you like, but at this aspect ratio you have so many options available to you. And this leads into my final point and why I love this monitor. I have been using multiple monitors since CRTs were popular. For the last 7 years or so I've never had a single monitor setup, and yet after just one day of using the EIZO here, I turned off my other monitors and used it exclusively for the better part of a week. It has really changed how I work. And the learning curve was non-existent too. Everything felt natural as soon as I started using it. The only adjustment I had to make was instead of snapping windows to the left and right of the screen, I now snap them to the top and bottom. Before I finish, I guess I should probably rattle off some tech specs. There's a 1000:1 contrast ratio, LED backlit IPS display with no backlight bleed, and a 180-degree viewing angles on horizontal and vertical. Apart from the unique resolution, it's actually an excellent quality monitor in its own right. So, negatives. There really aren't any. Like, it's not great for gaming because the field of view is horrible, but it's kind of a novel experience nonetheless. And you can still run in letterboxed HD or split the screen into two with display fusion and just have the game at the top. The only other negative is that I'm borrowing this monitor and I have to give it back. And I can't really afford to buy my own because it costs, well, you can look it up. So I've just tried my dream monitor and been able to use it for a week, and I will probably never be able to own it. First world problems and the like. On that depressing note, thanks for watching Tech Dredge. Like this video and subscribe if you want to see more. What do you think of the 1:1 aspect ratio? Do you think it's sheer productivity genius like I do, or do you think it's more like a gimmick? Let me know in the comments below. Have a good one.